to episode 3. I have the honor and privilege of having Rob Chevez of the CAZA Group on today. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, so I was thankful to have you hop on as our third guest.
Cool. Well, I love the topic, so let's dive into it.
Yeah. So the first question I always like to ask is, how did you wind up starting a real estate team? Can you walk us through the history of your group and where it started and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I'll give you the 2-minute version. I started on the investment side of the business. My wife and I were buying 20 houses a year, fixing and flipping them, selling them to investors turnkey. And then, every time I sold one of the assets, I felt like I was killing the golden goose. I wanted to buy assets for our own personal portfolio. And so we would get great deals, we'd renovate those deals, and we'd sell the majority of those deals to other investors because we needed active income. We needed cash, right? We needed to live day to day as we were building our portfolio. And I asked myself the question one day, what kind of asset would I sell that I didn't feel bad about selling the asset? I didn't feel like I was killing the golden goose. And I was like, well, retail, if I sold retail properties, I wouldn't feel like I was missing out on a great investment. And so that started my thinking around that. And then I read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, and then I started learning about how to actually build and scale a team and lead a team. And so that's the journey that we've really been on since 2009.
Okay. And I've always been curious, the CAZA Group.
Yep.
Where did that name come from?
Great question. Our business was originally called CAZA Properties, and the literal translation is to hunt for properties. That was the investment side of the business, right? And at one point, because all the brand experts tell you, oh, put the team name and your name, and all, and I did for a hot minute. For about 3 or 4 years, there was the CAZA Properties, and there was Robert Chevez and Company Real Estate Team. And I just remember one day I walked in, to the team meeting, and I was like, guys, I don't feel comfortable having this in my name. This business is more about us and about us pursuing a bigger, better life. And I'm almost thinking like we just merged that brand and we just call it the CAZA Group, right? Okay. And the meaning behind it is to pursue, right? Like instead of to hunt, it's like to pursue, to pursue a better life, to pursue a life by design, as opposed to, Robert Chevez and Company, and who the hell cares, right?
Right. Well, don't Google my real estate team name.
No, I know. Hey, man, this no judgment around that. That's just me personally how I felt.
No, yeah, I know. Well, that's really cool, and I've always wanted to know that, and I have Googled the word, and I'm like, I think I get it, but I have an opportunity to ask. I'm going to ask. So that's pretty cool. I love that. So you started, if I can just kind of recap, you started with your wife acquiring properties, flipping, and then you decided to start a group of agents. So walk us through, how did you hire your first team member, and who were they? What did they do?
First team member was first successful team member.
Okay.
Right. Was what you would probably say like a mini director of operations, right? An executive assistant. But essentially the analogy I gave him, and he's still with me today, his name's Matt Magel. He runs one of our expansion offices. The analogy I gave him was, hey man, I'm just going to go out and lead generate. I'm just going to go get listings. I'm going to go get as many as I possibly can. I'm going to just toss everything over my back, anything administrative over my back. And you're going to catch it, you're going to clean it, you're going to help us build listing management process, transaction management process. Like, I've got some ideas around what I want it to look like, but I'm just going to go sell, right? And I need you to handle back-end operations. Now, he'd been in sales prior.
And real estate sales, or just sales in general?
He'd been in real estate sales prior, right?
Okay.
And he'd been on another team. And, the team was fine, but the price point was off, and there was no real leadership there, and there was no vision for a bigger world. And I gave him a vision of what I wanted us to build. And then we got to work, to be honest with you. And he needed something more stable at the time. He needed stable income. He was a phenomenal salesperson, just wrong model, wrong avatar that they were targeting. And he's got this unique ability to be able to both his brain, he's 100% somebody that can influence and persuade, but he's also a systems guy, right?
Okay.
And he says he's not, but
So he built systems?
the guy is methodical, right? The guy is consistent. And so, so I had the right who early on, and I'm
Okay.
very grateful for it. And both of us have helped each other in our lives, right? And so a few years later, he came to me because I'd been hiring other salespeople, and he saw them making money, more money than him. And he's like, I need to make more money. And I was like, well, then you got to go into sales, because I can't really pay you more money.
Were you paying him a salary?
I was paying him a salary. Yeah, I was paying him a salary. It was a modest, low salary, right? But at the time, you're just starting out and you're thinking, how am I gonna, afford this person? But really, it's an investment in getting your time back, getting your freedom back, being able to do the things that actually matter, that drive the business forward. And I saw it as that, right? And so I was making an investment in him, in the business, in that relationship. And he was really smart. He said, I think my wife could do this job. And what we did was we moved his wife into the role, and then we moved him into sales.
And the role he was doing.
The role he was doing. So he didn't lose any income, right? He got the same income to the household. And, he was raising his little kids at the time, their kids at the time. And, or Ileana, just one at the time. And we moved his wife into that role, and she was way better than he ever was, right? She was way better than he was.
Does he know that yet? Because
he knows that.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he knows that. And it took him, because we just didn't have a good system at the time. It took him 6 months to do his first deal with me, right? But at month 6, he put 6 properties under contract, and every single one of them fell out. And I turned to my wife. I was like, he's going to quit.
Yeah.
This kid, he's going to quit. And there's no quit in him. He put them all back in under contract again, and then sold them all. And then from there on out, he was off to the races. And he was an agent at the time. Just like I think maybe we had 4 or 5 other agents, but he was definitely the shining example of like perseverance and hard work, and doing the thing, being consistent. And then that the business just continued to grow. We just continued to show up every day, continued to learn, continue to try new things. And last year we ended with 5 real estate teams. So we actually have an expansion model. We have 5 real estate agent teams, and then we have 4 investment businesses, or businesses that are tied, that help support the teams and also do investments. And Matt was the first one to launch the first expansion team for us.
Okay.
And that team did like 1.5 million in GC, or 1.4 million in GCI last year. And he's going to continue growing, and he'll probably open multiple offices. Right?
Okay. Would you mind, for those that do not know, what does expansion team, what's the definition of that for you?
Well, for me, the way our model operates is that I think of going into business partnership with people. You think about when you enter into most real estate teams, there's nowhere to grow past the CEO, right? Let's say you're a really high producer, and your CEO is the top of the ladder that's there, and there's no additional opportunity. Like, where does that person grow? And after 6 years, Matt came to me and said, what's my next step? I was like, your next step is to potentially, he'd been running the buyers team at the time. We had divvied up between listing team and buyer team. We don't do that anymore. Everybody has the ability to do both, right? We definitely have people that focus primarily on listings, because that's what they're good at, and their conversion rates show us that they're best at that. So we give them more opportunity, more appointments there. But I was like, Gary Keller's talking about this concept called expansion. It's almost like setting up your own franchise. If you think about it, we would become 50-50. The way we wanted to do it, it's not how Gary was describing it at the time. His was more like a agent relationship in another market type of expansion. Our idea behind it was business ownership. We're going to go into business together. You're going to own 50% of that business, right? We're going to get 50% of the profit in terms of revenue. So we don't get splits and we don't do any of that stuff. It's not based off of transactions. It's based off of profit. And so we focus on profit. We focus on holding the right margins on expenses for those offices and what the right cost of sales for those offices, because we need a certain amount of profit for our HQ. Think of HQ as like a holding company of a basket of businesses. And we essentially create operations for those businesses, right? And we help them with those operations. So of course we didn't know what the heck we were doing. And I feel like now we understand our model and what we're doing and how we're building it and who our avatar is. But it took a good 5 or 6 years to muddle through all of that, right?
It's an interesting model. So if I can try to summarize, you have a hub headquarters, CAZA Group, and then your expansions are what, different areas or neighborhoods, or how do you define that?
Yeah, areas, neighborhoods, like, there's a couple ways that you can expand it. We are expanding with 2 types of avatars. One is a hyper-local neighborhood expert. So you could pick areas and dominate those areas. And you know this, Andrew, right? The difference between one area in DC and another area in DC could be drastically different, right? You could literally have probably 4 quadrants, 4 teams, if you wanted to go the hyper-local route. I realized after 5 years of building hyperlocal neighborhood teams that I was not in love with the hyperlocal model, that Matt was crushing the hyperlocal model. All of our original teams were hyperlocal neighborhood teams and they do well and we understand how to take territory there. But that I personally had built my business working with builders, investors, developers, wholesalers, and I loved the investment game. And that if I wanted to be authentic to myself and I wanted to expand nationally, then I needed a lead gen system that was unique to us to be able to expand in any part around the world, or let's just say the country. And about 6 months ago, I sat down with everybody and said, guys, I think I personally just want to expand what I call the agent investor model, which is I would turn on one of our grid communities. So grid is this investment network that I run, right? There's 40 communities around the country, 30,000 members now. And that I would use my own platform, this platform that we created a decade ago, to be a lead gen source for any teams that I want to expand through that. And so we just launched in Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, with that particular model. That's like you turn on a grid community, you then go after absentee landlords, you build a network of multi-transactional clients, right? And you pour into them. And it's a simple model, but it's effective. It works. I've done it forever. Sometimes the simplest things are the best things. And instead of trying to be something that I wasn't, I decided to kind of lean into who I was and what I wanted to focus on. And I call that zoning a market, right? You zone a market by, some people naturally love the luxury game and they ooze that, and that's the game that they want to play, and they should lean into that, right? Other people want to be waterfront experts in their local community, or the neighborhood expert, or the seller downsizer, senior, whatever it is. Like, we realize that you need to pick. Somebody's got to pick. I just know that my expansion teams moving forward, they're all going to have this one thing in common, which is they want to build wealth and they want to help the community build wealth. And they're using real estate as a tool to be able to do that.
Right. So
it's kind of a long answer to your specific question, but.
Can we, no, that was great. Can we dig a little bit deeper into your expansion model?
Sure.
Because I haven't heard of a model like this before, or at least talked to someone with this kind of a model. So you have your headquarters, and then you have, how many expansion models do you have right now?
Well, right now we have 5 real estate teams, and then we have 4 ancillary businesses, right? And so what are the property management, construction, hard money lending, and we consider grid, believe it or not, like one of the other businesses that's there.
So the 5,
Mhm.
what kind of support are they getting from your headquarter or hub station, and how does it work in turn? Can you talk about like who's paying for marketing, who's paying for the leads?
Sure.
How is it set up that way?
Think of it like within HQ, it's all people infrastructure, director of operations, recruiting, ISA, right? Like all of our ISAs. So all of the people infrastructure to make the machine go, that coach and consult those expansion locations are there in HQ. Each P&L, each expansion office runs its own P&L. They have their own marketing, their own, they pay for their own listing management, their own transaction man. They do all that in their own P&L. But what they don't have to do is they don't have to go build out an ISA infrastructure, or they don't have to do any of the potential recruiting into their organization, or even coaching, consulting of their agents, because we are leverage for them to be able to do that. As a team owner right now, you're putting many team owners, putting on different hats. Like, I got my recruiting hat on. Oh, I got my go get a listing hat on. Oh, I got to train my team now. Now I got to hold them accountable, right? HQ handles all the ops piece of that, so that the leader can focus on building that business and influence and attraction.
So each expansion pays for and does its own marketing, but the leads go back to HQ for the ISA team to answer and then to set appointments?
Yeah, so what happens is HQ builds out all the marketing, all the global marketing, right? Okay. And let's be honest, agents don't know how to, most teams don't know how to properly run Facebook ads or PPC ads, or track them, or understand the conversion or the numbers, or keeping track of all that. So we take a portion of their budget. They say, hey, this is what we want to spend in marketing. We help set all of that infrastructure up. We know when those leads come in that they are that team's, lead source. Okay. And the ISA team then books appointments specifically for that team, right? Okay. And with tech today, with different call rail phone numbers and text numbers, like, it's very easy to be able to track and understand like where that lead originated from, whose dollars that originated from, right? Okay. And so one of the things we're working on, and I just saw our marketing team just put it together, is a depository of places where the teams can go get access to all the branding and the listing presentations and the buyer presentations and the social media and the clips, like with the brand guide, so that they don't have to like do it or reinvent it or think about it. HQ also helps with all the 36 touch and event systems. Like, a lot of what we do is we put on events, large events, right? And the individual offices run their own event playbook, right? So they might run their own event playbook and they'll spend their own budget on the event playbook, but HQ's created all the framework of how to do that properly. And we help with all the emails that go out to all the databases. And so we're just leverage. Think of it as like operational leverage for them to keep them in their 20, right? Now, if you want to see what this looks like at scale, then you go and you look at Place, right? Ben Kinney and Chris Wars started a company called Place. Last year they raised, it's a Keller Williams, they're originally from Keller Williams, but they have teams that are with Coldwell Banker, Keller, EXP, Compass. They're team brand agnostic. Sure. And they they raised $100 million last year from Goldman Sachs. It sold 8% of their company for it. Wow. And what they did, Andrew, was one of the reasons, you're like, why would Goldman Sachs spend that much, have $1 billion valuation for a company that essentially has an infrastructure, operations infrastructure for teams? Well, it's because they wrapped it with a CRM, right? And that's Brivity. And I know that's, a lot of the game that you're playing, right? Right. With what you're doing. So you might want to go and do a little reconnaissance there, right?
And yeah, I hear you on that front. I was aware of that going on. So definitely an interesting model that doesn't need to be ignored.
Yeah, but here's what's interesting. This is McDonald's. This is Chick-fil-A. This is right. That's what, when you do this at a high level, right? Our model is a Chick-fil-A model.
Mm-hmm.
We actually take 5% off the top. Chick-fil-A takes 15% off the top, and then they split 50-50 with the store owners. We are 5% off the top, and then we split 50-50 with the owners of that entity. So this isn't anything new. This has been going on for years and years and years. This is new to real estate, right? It's new to what we do. And it's not even that new. It's been around for a decade. It's not been mainstream because only the best of the best of the best ever decided to try to do this, because it's hard, right? Yeah. Running one team is hard enough. Running, Place runs 250 teams right now. Yeah. It's a lot of teams.
Yeah. So you have your hands full running your team, the head HQ team, and then these expansion teams and the 4 other businesses that you have going on. So what does a day for Rob look like? How are you staying organized and up to speed on everything? And
I'm less busy now than when I was as an agent, right? And so what you learn is that you find the right people that have the want and the desire to build a business. It's their business. And what we do is we hold them accountable to what they say their business goals are. And so I just play really a coach consultant to them and helping them run their businesses more effectively, more efficiently. So a day in the life of Rob is helping motivate, train, lead those teams, right? And obviously build our brand and build our influence in the marketplace, and continue to expand our businesses, right? Different lines of business.
How are you finding your next expansion owners, or do they find you? Can you walk us through how that kind of works? And you mentioned Chick-fil-A.
Sure.
Sounds like you know a lot about them, so I'll just go there. I know that interview process can take years for a new Chick-fil-A franchisee.
Yeah, we're not that hardcore, right? Chick-fil-A has got this line out the door.
How do you compare to Chick-fil-A in terms of who you find as your next expansion owners?
It's interesting. This is why I love going after one particular avatar now, just the agent and investor. So Grid helps me find those leaders, because Grid naturally attracts somebody that's already an investor, right? For those that don't know, Grid is the largest agent-led real estate investment network in the world now. So each one of those locations is led by an agent leader, and within each one of those communities, there's like 1,000 to 4,000 people, right? And every month, emails go out to think about it, 30,000 people, and we have calls to action that might say something like, "Hey, interested in launching your next, Grid community, or thinking about maybe wanting to start your own office." And don't, think about it like having a business in a box. So instead of having to go and like somebody figure out like all the stuff that we had to figure out, Andrew, to build our business, right? Like you could essentially say like, here's a business in a box that goes after this very particular type of client. And if you're not interested in going after this client, no big deal. Like, we're looking for people that are passionate about going after this kind of client, multi-transactional, they love investments, they want to build wealth in that process. Great. And so people start raising their hand, because you will attract the person that you're going after, right? And what you ooze. And so they find us now, right? They find us now. Now we haven't gotten there yet. We will start bringing on internal recruiters or attractors whose only job is to kind of go out and just go into the US and look for the right who's. And then there'll be, just like Chick-fil-A, there's an application process, right? They have to fit a certain size, right, of business. And so we're looking for businesses that are between like 500 and 1.5 million in GCI.
Okay.
And that's really our sweet spot right there.
Got it.
And our job is to take them to the next level, right? Get that $500,000 little mini team to go to $1 million, get that $1.5 million, person to go to 3 to 4 million. But the idea is not to just do more revenue. The idea is for the leader to learn how to get back their time, right? That's a more precious asset, the most precious asset that we have, right, is time. So as my daughter turns 21 today, which is crazy, right?
Oh, wow.
I reflect on that more than ever. It's like, okay, great. We've built a business that if I wanted to clear out my calendar, I 100% completely clear out my calendar. I have enough leaders in place that can take things over.
Yeah, definitely buying back your time, leveraging the right people. That's amazing. So when you have these extensions or expansion groups, you mentioned, the 50-50 owner split, and you're kind of at the high level coaching.
Sure.
Are you getting into the weeds with the expansion team, or are you coaching at the owners and then they're kind
Just
of
the owners?
Okay.
Just the owners. I mean, we'll do kind of like overall arching coaching, right? Like, hey guys, that's more like training. That's not coaching, right? So we'll provide training, but I pour into the leaders and the leaders pour into their people. And by the way, not all of them, some of them are 50-50 partners, and some of them are what we call area directors. They're working their way to partnership and ownership. Right?
Okay.
They've got to do $1 million plus, right? Because they officially become like an owner up into that part. They're area directors, and depending on how we negotiate, they'll get somewhere between 10 and 50% of the profit. But they don't
until they graduate to that next tier level.
Exactly. And Chick-fil-A, what's interesting is those owners, they're not really owners. Right? They're profit owners.
Yeah.
But ours are legitimate owners. Right? It's like, hey, the operating agreement says you own 50%. So once they get to that number and they are within culture, it's like they become an owner. But just like a partner at a Boston Consulting Group or, a large consulting practice.
Right. That's cool. So you have all these different expansion teams, groups underneath you. It's a very competitive market nowadays, right? Mm-hmm. Inventory is low, interest rates are high, although they're starting to come down a little bit. How do you remain, and there's a lot of agents, right? How do you remain competitive in a market like this and keep your groups hungry and getting business?
You keep them consistent. Right? You keep them consistent. It's just like, guys, every day we're going to go to the gym. Every day we're going to do our push-ups. Every day we're going to do our sit-ups. We're going to make sure that we're thinking the right thoughts. We're going to make sure that we're providing value to the marketplace. We're going to make sure that we're providing value in a way that the marketplace responds to it based on what's happening in the marketplace. So you got to change your messaging based on what's happening in the marketplace. And it's not more complicated than that, right? It's like, in every shift, there's opportunity. In 2008, when the market shifted here, I created the most wealth that I ever created. Like, a shift to me is opportunity, right? Like, there are people leaving the industry, which means we'll take more market share. And there's people moving to safety and flocking to safety. So teams that are not good and that are not great at encouraging their team and that don't have a specific lead generation system and don't have a value proposition, like you'll take their people. You'll end up taking their people. So the strong will come out of this stronger, right? Now, at the same time, you got to make sure that you're adjusting your finances, right? Because there's 30% less transactions happening. So you got to make sure that you're cutting costs, right? And going after where the business is, right? And who's selling right now? Like right now, inventory is low, right? And you think about, Andrew, all the listings that you guys have taken here recently, I dare say they're probably distressed, downsizing, landlords recalibrating their portfolio, some kind of estate sale, Like there are people that have to sell, and
Right.
it's rare that you're going to find the move up buyer, right? Somebody's going to trade their 3.5% interest rate for a 6.5% interest rate and a more expensive property. Like, no,
Yeah, it's not happening right now.
it's not happening, right?
Yeah.
So you have to find where energy is flowing, what the market is responding to, and then build good marketing campaigns around that.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. And that is what the consensus has been with a lot of other team leaders I've been talking to, kind of just maintaining that, that consistency there and not taking back on brand consistency either.
Yeah.
But doing the same thing that you're doing before and taking, like you said, taking market share.
Yeah. Yep.
So, Rob, before you had this like grid model and current model that you had now, where were your people coming from? How were you recruiting? Kind of going back from the early stages, just for people who are like maybe considering the team model or trying to figure out the team. How did you recruit before you had the infrastructure you have today?
So the way I would say we eliminated the word recruit out of our vocabulary, and we said, okay, we're going to attract people based on our core values and what we're building. And more than likely, they're going to be in our SOI. They're going to be in our sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. So as part of our lead generation, one of the things that I would do, Andrew, is obviously I would connect with you. We would talk about a new listing or whatever in the marketplace. And then I'd probably say, oh, by the way, if you know of anybody that's thinking about getting into real estate, we're actively like hiring, like our business is growing. And I would have that discussion over and over and over again. And in fact, that's how I found Matt. Right. And so I really believe that everything that you ever want really is already in the database and the people that you already have. It's a core grid philosophy that we have, powers of the network. And so, people spend so much money on these cold, and by the way, we've spent a ton of money, right? Like on cold leads and all the rest. And yet, if you go and pull all the largest, most successful businesses out there, more than 50% of all their business always comes from their SOI.
Right.
And typically the majority of the hires that they hire come from a friend telling another friend, right? Or a coworker or a realtor saying, hey, you should come over here, right? And so do a really good job of taking care of your people and do a really good job of taking care of your clients, build core values that will resonate with people. You're going to attract the right people as long as you understand who you are as a business, Andrew.
Yeah.
What you represent.
One of our best, kind of like you and with Matt and having him move into the agent role and then finding his wife who you said was better than him kind of thing. One of our best hires, Peter, who was still with us today too, came from an administrative assistant that we had who was like, hey, I know you're hiring for this position. Let me put you in touch with him. So I think it truly is the best way to attract talent to your team is start with your team first and then kind of just expand into your sphere from there. Yeah.
I think if I was to think back about probably the biggest mistake that I made when it came to growing my team, was that I didn't have this mindset of constantly growing the team. Mm-hmm. Right. What would happen is I'd get to like 5 or 6 agents and I'm like, okay, good, we're good. And then I get those 5 or 6 agents like really producing. And then what would happen is because of life, 1 agent would leave or 2 agents would leave over a 2 or 3 year period. And now you're redoing it all over again. You're having to find somebody else and train them. And it takes 1 to 2 years to develop somebody. If I was to do it all over again, it's like, oh, you're constantly training, you're constantly attracting, you're constantly developing people. So really, once you decide that you're going to go team route, you're essentially saying, I'm now in the leadership development game. Mm-hmm. That's what you're saying, right? And it took me 10 years to figure that thing out, right? That nobody told me that. Like I just gave it to you in plain language, right? But there was no, like, even when you read the Red book or the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, there's no like real discussion on, there should be a role in there. Somebody's only job is to always be recruiting talent to your organization.
Right. We've gotten stuck in hard places early on as well, when we kind of took the same mindset. We're like, oh, we have the team, this is great. Then someone for whatever reason would leave, and then we were hiring out of necessity and we were in a bad position because we had, a lot of leads, a lot of appointments, a lot of deals going on. And we were trying to all kind of take, the overflow off of everyone without having the new people in line already. So I completely agree with that concept of, you should always be talking to people. You never know what can happen, obviously, but always be talking to people, always be recruiting or attracting that next great talent.
100%. Took me a long time to figure that out.
Right.
And you need a bench, right? You need a bench of talented people.
Right. Yeah.
And when you have when you have a bench of talented people, and you have a good reputation in the marketplace, you never feel handcuffed to your current infrastructure.
Right.
That's really important for team leaders to understand what I mean by that. Because I know, because I was this team leader, where you might have a really successful agent that's in your team that isn't necessarily in culture, but they're driving a ton of business. And, a young leader is going to tolerate that because they're like, oh, shoot, they leave, like I'm going to lose like all this revenue to the business. But a team leader that is always has a bench and is always recruiting and is always developing people and is always just in this, development of people business, they'll never feel that. And so my advice is get really good at that game. If you decide you want to build a team, because by the way, teams are not for everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
Teams do not mean you will make more money. Right? Teams mean that you have to give up money in order to get back your time and make more money in the future. But a lot of business owners never get there. Yeah. Because they don't raise their leadership lid to get there.
Yeah, agreed. And I've seen that happen, I'm sure as you have, countless times, but to each their own too. Not everyone's made out to be on a team or lead a team. And some people are, right? So I know we're coming up on time, Rob. And I normally ask what's your number one best piece of advice, but you kind of just touched on that with the attracting the talent. So I'm trying to think. One thing that I know I did in my business was ultimately I was in sales, obviously, for the building of the team. And then I eventually transitioned to the leadership role where I effectively got out of sales. When did that happen for you in your business? I think you had mentioned you're not in sales anymore. So when did you make that change?
It's interesting. I would say that I'm in sales more than ever, just a different type of sales, right? But the day-to-day transaction, if that's what you mean, that happened about 6 years ago. I am still though actively talking to my sphere, and I get leads that come in and I give it to the appropriate team member based on location and personality and all the rest. So I'm still in the lead generate. Like, you never stop being in the lead generation game. Like, that is the game that we are as business owners take on. But I don't know how to do dot loop to save my life, or like how to, I don't know how to do any of that, right? I understand how to help team leaders build a life by design, and how to win back their time, which seems to be a really big problem with team leaders, right? I was there, right? So I understand that. And then I think I find myself coaching my team these days in what I call creating an income flip, learning how to start converting your self-employed job into a business, and or buy assets that pay you back over time so that you've got more passive income than active income. And the sooner an agent starts thinking that, the sooner they understand the game that they're actually playing, right? And the game, when you think about the game that we're actually playing, is we're playing the game of Monopoly and the game of business, right? And, Andrew, I suspect you're hoping to build a business that has some tangible value that over time provides for your people and for your family.
Mhm.
And the only way you're going to do that is by raising that leadership lid and understanding where you're going to take those raw dollars that you earn in that business and what investments are you going to deploy. Like, you have a decision. Am I going to invest it in technology? Am I going to invest it in people? Am I going to invest it in buying properties? Right. And that's going to be very uniquely you, right?
Right.
But you'll have it to make that decision, just like any agent out there listening. They have to think about, okay, I just made $10,000, and now I'm going to live off of 5, and that other 5, I have options, right? Uncle Sam's going to get a piece of that. So let's just say Uncle Sam's going to get $2,500 of that.
Mhm.
Okay, I've got $2,500 left. So where am I going to pour that in? Am I going to put it into leads? Am I going to put it into self-development? Am I going to save some of it to go buy an investment? So that's where people have to start thinking, become very uniquely them to make those decisions. But most people are not even aware. So part of what I want to do is bring awareness to that conversation. And, that's why we get agents certified in what I call grid AI, right? It's just like, how do you do this on purpose?
Right. Well, that's a great answer. And I love that way of thinking. And I hope a lot of people picked up on what you were talking about today in terms of thinking bigger and that bigger picture beyond just real estate transactions, right?
Yeah.
And kind of growing yourself as you learn the business. So, Rob, I really want to thank you for your time again. I know, like I said before, you're a very busy man, and I'm very grateful to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much, and hope to run into you one of these days since we're in the same area, and we'll catch up.
Sounds great. Thanks, Andrew. Take
All
care.
right, thanks. You too.